It's great to be here. And for those who know me, our dad of 5 sons. There was that to do standing, right? But it's quite consistent, so that's one thing. Honestly, other one that's quite interesting about being a father of a house with 5 sons is standards are extremely big over there. And enforcement of those standards are also quite big. But it's also true, who you hand the standards over, right? When I am the person enforcing the standards, you get a certain result. You give it to the mom, and it just works. I still haven't figured that out. Maybe the inner decision, you guys can give me some tips. But for me, that's just a very distinct nuance to standards. With all that said, just a quick introduction. Aldi Loafsham. I've been in the payments industry for about 26, 27 years. And I must say standards has been there all along. And I think the one thing that resonated through me through cash, check, electronic payments, card, and my international experience with Visa has been that standards has been an absolute building block in all of us. And today I hope that we can explore a bit about why that is. Because standards don't just happen and they don't just work. I'll be upfront on that. So it takes some effort, and it takes some effort by various participants that get us there. So without further ado, I'm just going to get my panelists to quickly introduce themselves. Sean and Will, it's a privilege to be with you on the panel. I think we're going to have some fun today. And I hope the audience joins us in that fun, very, very energizing topic. So Sean, over to you, and then maybe we'll hold a quick intro. He's actually cool.
Hi, Sean Maton for the sister and me. I've been around US industry for now 36 years. Sure, so I forgot. Somewhere around there. From a payments perspective, in standards itself, I've been at this since I think it was 2008. Around there where we actually started talking about how we standardize within this ecosystem of ours. And one thing I've realized is we all had a different idea when you talking out standards from that perspective. But your answer on why the difference between you and what? Security.
Which is also a standard. Okay, so that's environment and that's security. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Rahul, one of the co-founders and CEO at Peach. We're a PSP. Yeah, I've been building Peach for the last 13 years. We're now in 9 countries across Africa. So and definitely talk to a lot about interoperability.
I'm looking forward to that. So, I mean, you said to the audience here that's got similar level and probably years of experience. And I think one of the great things that I always ponder about is, so if payments are inclusive in an ecosystem that we live in, can we think of any space in South Africa where people can't pay because of the lack of standards? So tricky English, so that was all people from there.
Maybe take a step back and, I've said this a few times now, like we talk about financial inclusion, but one of the biggest, your most important building blocks is access, right? So you can't build inclusion if there's no access. And I think the whole point of interoperability standards is to provide that ecosystem and create access for people, right? So when we say, are there ways people can't pay? I'm sure everyone can pay for a transaction or for a product or service that you're buying in some form or another. But can someone in the informal markets access e-commerce the same way that, someone living in Sea Point in Cape Town does? And do they have access to credit? Do they have access? I think that's what creates the challenge of in this inclusivity and inclusion. So I think before I moved to South Africa, I was doing some strategy consulting stuff in the US, and one of the products we worked on was creating the standard, the cheese standard for wireless charging. This technology came out of Amway Group, which had a water purifier where they had to get electricity through the water. And that's when they created the patents for induction charging. And then they realized that if they don't contribute this to a standard or to make these patents into a patent pool that's available to everybody, that will never grow as an ecosystem. So, from there you learn, like, to build an ecosystem, it needs to be fully accessible. You need to have standards in place that everyone can adopt. And we see that in payments. You mentioned it all the way. It's central to payments, whether it's 3D secure, whether it's ISO messages, everything runs on some sort of standard or not.
3D secure we'll talk about later for as onboardings, but I think one thing that's interesting then is if we talk about our current payment landscape, and Sean, you've been around a while, have you seen any system reaching utopia in terms of standards?
Yes. Which one? RTGs.
So, and the rest are catching up, don't? So you just need to continue, right? So just quickly, from I sit on a number of global standard forums like ISO T68, which looks after the financial world. And then, of course, I'm a convener on the PIPC, where everybody actually presents or comes and asks or changes within the ISO messages. We evaluate, give guidance, change, accept, don't accept, life goes on. And that's where all the problems start. So, I mean, ISO in itself, ISO 20022, actually came about in 2004. That's when the first sets of messages were actually built. And if we look at our latest implementation from a global perspective, so all the cross-borders, the MIs, I think there's 90 of them now, and they have gone on to ISO, you've actually only had 2 changes that we actually had to apply. And a global level to the standard that was set in 2004. There are a number of other requests coming through. Because of FATF, because of your, let's call it evolution, or fintechs wanting to use it for crypto payments. So there's a number of those things that are being added, but the base of the standard itself actually hasn't changed. So what we did in 2004 still stands today. And I think that's what people need to realize about payments. It is not something that is complicated. Yes, we overcomplicate the peripherals, we overcomplicate the integration, but the payment itself, guys, is as uncomplex as what we can get. What we are driving to is to get a common standard around referencing these things. So, I mean, because of the work I do and in the different contexts that people talk, and the reason I said the RTGS system, when we actually did the migration into the ISO standard, the 18 months we spent in actually getting to a common standard on terminology took them there. Yeah. So now when somebody globally talks, everybody understands. So yes, that standard is driving that standard common understanding of what actual payment is. It is not complex. It is very simple.
It's interesting to mention that I was converted a couple of years ago. I was also an EFT guy, right? And I thought, Desti since Toast was ACD format as CP checks. And I realized you could do different things in Core. Quite a few different things. But one thing that has fascinated me about Core is the way that it's taken standards to level of simplicity and seamless, let's call it seamless experience levels. Now, RTGS is so serious, I don't even know it happens. So give that. But as a consumer, it's pretty nice in the Core space. Now, Rule, you've got lots of experience in that space.
Yeah.
And Peter's not done a bad job in enabling the e-commerce space. You have done a very interesting thing recently. 6 months ago was the UDI standard that you've adopted to take QR into this space. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think our biggest, so I'll come to that as well, but like that links to what we think about, right? We talk about Africa, and Africa is a collection of 54 countries. There's 1.4 billion consumers on the continent. How easy is it for someone to pay cross-border in Africa, right? Can I move money from an MTN Momo wallet in Uganda to a Bay wallet in Senegal? Almost impossible. Well, there's now a few players trying to do that. And I think with fragmentation, interoperability and enforcing a standard becomes harder. So we're talking about card. There's only 3 big markets in Africa that actually do card in a meaningful way. It's Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria. Everywhere else, and then you have Kenya, which is dominated by one mobile wallet, and that all the other countries are a spectrum in between these two ends, right? Where it's a mix of 1 or 2 or 3 mobile wallets. I mean, we did a study, we looked at it, and we only covered 17 countries. There are 300 different stores of value that consumers are using in various shapes and forms across just 17 out of 54 countries. Now, how do you drive interoperability? On top of that, now you have rear-handing methods, which are on individual standards at individual platforms globally. So one of the things we've been thinking about is in travel, like how does a tourist pay? Why can't we make it easier for an Indian tourist coming from India to South Africa and just pay with their payment method that they're actually used to? And it's a piece by piece. So what one of the things we're working on right now is launching UPI as a payment method in South Africa, but that's for Indian tourists coming here so that you don't have to take out a Visa or a MasterCard or a, convert America. Back in the day, I used to travel with travelers checks. Exactly. There's American Express. But I think that's the challenge we all stick with. And I don't know if there's an answer to this question that you're asking, and can there be one standard that works across all of these layers? RTGS is one for a very specific use case. Card is one for very specific use case. But how do we bridge this problem that we face as a challenge we face in Africa of trying to achieve interoperability? Man, I don't know the answer.
Not sure to reach out there. Because if you think about standards, maybe the ISO 202 2004, it took us quite a bit of time to adopt it here. So I think the software actually did a better job of our name. It was much shorter. Yeah, if we think about the standard setting, this barrier was the key. Because I think that's the other thing that you would avoid. How do we fix this fragmentation? And is it by getting some of the constituents here to lead us into that space?
From a global perspective, I must say to keep, and we've actually started attracting a lot of these mobile providers that are starting to ask how we can adapt the standard for them from that perspective so that they can get one standard. And it's not to say, and I'm maybe going to get a bit technical, yeah. And so if we look at corporates, they put an ISO standard, ISO 202 standard. It's called the Pay in One for a reason. And then we have the interbank space, which is called the PAX 8. So there's no pay there. So and there's interoperability between those two messages because they talk a common language. They have a common business model. Now, it is, if we look at the rest of, and it's not just RTGS, if we look at SADC, right, the interoperability there, because they've also gone live. If we look at cross-border payments, they've also just gone live. I mean, they've been on a 4-year journey. It's coming to an end in November 2025. They'll also be on ISO. So now we have those ecosystems now talking a common language. So when you talk about an amount, when you talk about a value date, when you talk about a creditor, when you talk about a debtor, it's not a home in bank or all of those domesticated kind of terminologies. Big spots becoming common. Pay homes, pay plus, pay shop is ISO 20022. One thing from a global perspective we've realized is everybody can be on ISO 20022, right? If we take some of the messages, for example, PAX 8, that's on version 13 already. That's how it's evolved. And if we look at a global implementation, we take Target 2, they implemented ISO 20022 last year, March. April. The March was the cross-border stuff. They were both on the same standard, but they were interoperable. And something we realized is everybody can be on the same standard, but we need to harmonize. We need to make sure we are utilizing it in the same way. And that's always been the challenge from a standards perspective. It is open. I wouldn't say too much interpretation, and people are creative and started utilizing it in their own context and not utilizing it in a global context. And it's human nature. People do that.
So on that point, Shigong, you've been challenged by the audience who say, well, that's great, but can each panelist please define what they see as interoperability? Let's see if it comes out the same, because I think that's a big challenge. And I want to give would start us all.
And then maybe I'll just say I agree, but
Okay, so my interpretation on Pish's lens is very simple, right? We are in the business of allowing someone to pay someone else for a product or service or a transaction or a commercial activity, right? And then for us, interoperability means you can pay with whatever you want, and it should be received in any other store of value that you need. So you could be paying from your USDC crypto wallet, and you want it in your NetBank bank account. That should just work. Yeah. So for us, interoperability is how do we make this happen seamlessly? You're starting with Africa and across the globe, allow consumers, businesses to transact at a least. So you create the interoperable layer. Yeah, and the tutorial paradigm what Sean is saying that they're not going to solve it anytime soon, so they can continue building what they're building, right? And I think there's a big market for us.
I'm not going to say I agree yet, so agree, but not 100%, so Sean?
Yeah, I'm going to go a couple of layers way down and let you see. So to me, interoperability is two endpoints actually understanding each other, having a common understanding of what is being exchanged. It is not to say, so the one could be an XML file, another one could be an API, right? These two things need to understand what they need to perform. And to me, that is where interoperability is at the lowest level. Yes, we can bring it back to you've got a mobile device, you've got an internet, you've got a card. All of those things need to somehow know you've got as you go up the step, but at the lowest level, those two endpoints need to understand.
So I think it's clear, my view is as follows. It is clear there is no interoperability yet. Because interoperability for me is we are all speaking English and not all of us understood exactly what each of us meant. So it means you're all in one standard, but the application of that standard hasn't been 100% disseminated and always see this, understanding us in some way. So for me, that's what interoperability has to get to the core. Is if I say I'm giving you a glass of water, everybody understands what that's means. If I say I'm giving you a glass of water, all those ions that you did in the previous life, nobody understands what that means. And for me, if that is a translation, it's common language, common understanding, and you can execute it. That's what interoperability is for me. So unfortunately, not one answer, but hopefully it helps the audience with some context. Very good question, by the way. The other one I just want to quickly go through and then going with our questions is just in terms of stores of value, what's the best way to harmonize standards for intrusion? So, Rahul, I'm going to see you're really looking
replace credit and also already. I thought inclusion is such a misused word. And, everything is, but I think inclusion is, again, it's access, like how easily is it available? So why did M-Pesa take off in Kenya? Is because people didn't have a way to send money from one part of Kenya, or Nairobi to Mombasa, or working in Nairobi, couldn't send money to their family, in the villages. And that's why, Safaricom came up with the wallet. And the biggest use case was this within the country transfer. Only, the merchant side of it will become king much later. Right. So what is available, I think, especially in Africa, and again, the problem is of access. It is not of choice. It's not like people have access and then you say, hey, I choose not to use this store of value or that one. It's just different access levels available, even in South Africa today, right? How many branches of a bank are there in a township versus in a densely populated urban environment? And that's the problem of access. What does it cost you to get there? I think there was Flash Tree where someone had done this research and it said, people spend almost 50 rands, which is a lot of money in their monthly budget to get to a retail store in the informal markets. And so I think this access is a problem. So I don't know if there's one store of value, but digital is definitely the future. I can say that, because it removes the need for a physical location, and that provides easier and more democratized access. And that's why digital wallets are growing, Momo is growing, crypto is growing across Africa because it's easier access.
That access point gives me another segue, just for Sean. So one of the questions we get here is we looked at how we've progressed access to facial was very limited. Is there any lessons, and I'm not going to give that to you because I meant most out there is to share. Is there any lessons, just short lessons we can learn versus in like India, how they've managed to scale? I think Boss and the timelines obviously differ. We are the starting point, they're 5-10 years in, but they've managed to do something special. And access seems to be a differentiator basis. So any view on what we could learn from the standards restricted there? Sure.
We actually don't have a standard for accessible.
So that's the first choice.
Because it's human. And the human in itself, depending on how he feels when he wakes up that day, will depend on that access. Whether it's app A, B, C, B, E, F. To me, at the end of the day, it's not just the payments, bro. And that's the reason we have the $1 million+ app out there. Because it is the you from that perspective. I think coming back to the previous question around the amount of wallets available, to me, that problem is no different to the QR problem that was in China. We actually didn't have, and we still don't have. I know Aisha is working on the new standards related to it, and when that's going to happen, I don't know, because it's difficult to herd all of the people together. Is there was no standard then, and I mean, to get that you right, there was 15 QR codes on this screen, and you kind of needed to select one depending on the app. Now the wallets are the same. Every fintech, MNO, have all designed wallets based on their use cases. So it's not a common store of value. It's a common store of value, but the wallet in itself has different features. Hence that access. Do I want Tantama? Do I heat Tantanit? The big on Vodacom is in Zolbo. Want to buy Enta? It's easier just to transfer money into the Vodacom wallet than my Enta because it's cheaper. So it's that use case. And that's where that accessibility cuts in. I think at the end of the day, it becomes a difficult factor on how do you standardize. Yes, we can standardize the tech in the background. We can standardize how the different wallets talk to each other. If you take, for example, PayShop, that standardizes how people communicate.
regardless of what the wallet looks like. To me, at the end of the day, sources for course, those wallets provide a feature, but they do not need to run on the same tech. They don't need to be standardized. How do they communicate with each other? Use a standard relay. At the end of the day, hence interoperability.
But already for also does I see is like twitching really. No, beyond in it can but it can be a pay shoppings.
So I think, India, when you're building a two-sided network, right, you need both consumers adopting it, the rails or the standard or the wallet or whichever wallet, and then you also need acceptance points, right? Now, I think in South Africa with PayShop, what happened in India, or why PayShop is my view, is not working in South Africa so far. I think it's regulatory failure. And the reason for that is you left it to the market to decide, hey, should we adopt it? Whereas what worked in India was that there was control. You had to it. And I think that mandate or that you're relying on collective bill, which doesn't exist over here. And that's why I say it's a regulatory failure. So I'm saying it as driven. That's why I worked in India. It's because RBI didn't give people a choice. You could access, even today, you can create an app and you can access any bank account through any app. So on the consumer side, you left it, made it an imperative process to say, hey, let's get consumers using this. On the merchant side, anyone could adopt the QR and go out and get merchants. So now you have different players on different sides of the ecosystem. And I could, Google Pay can scan a phone pay QR and, they didn't do that initially. You had Marat Pay, which was another startup that came and said, hey, here's a universal QR, and they gained a lot of traction.
No, that probably mention is not unique to the rail we're talking, right? So, I mean, my Barclays days and Visa days, I used to travel up Africa, and the point was true that there's no mobile payments there, but I could pay a spot. But what I found, there was over subscription on acceptance, which was unique, right? You arrive in the shopping center and there's a KCP, 6 card options like the Barclays Pass, there's a FNB Pass, there's a Equity Bank Pass, and depending on which card you apply, they would hide the other passes. And why was that? So people was of economies of scale. And I think it's a bit of that, provocative in PayShop today. So I'm multi-banked. So when my son sent me on my profile, like I said, I send me request to pay. And never send it to nearly set the bank, my main bank, because they didn't support request to pay. They'll send it to Time Bank or they'll send it to Discovery, which is free, right? I told them to send it there. That's part of the standard in the house. And then I could accept it and free because all the others charge me, right? And I deem myself fairly sophisticated user. I think I do that. Question is, why we're allowing that to happen, right? To your point. And then how is everybody else out there experiencing? Now, a question that I want to actually then latch onto that, very provocative. I'm not going to mention who it said. I don't want to expose anyone, but why has the ISO standard on so bad? Why has it taken us 2 years in the ISO to edit the salts?
Okay, I'll repeat myself there. The ISO standard is the language between two endpoints. The ISO standard doesn't talk to acceptance. Yes. It doesn't talk to human behavior. It looks to behavior. And there's nothing to do with ISO standards. That has to do with maybe setting standards in pricing, maybe setting standards in. So standards in itself is a broad term. So ISO in itself is used in your PayShop rail. That's where it's used. And so now everybody understands what they need to do. Same standards are to same standard on cross-border payments. Same standards is foster payments, the US. Same standards is foster payments, SEPA in Europe. It is the messaging layer. It is not, it will not, and people need to realize that, change mine and your perception of using the product, because there's no standard from a product perspective. So you and experience similar to the
the previous one I mentioned, you start shopping. So I want to buy Vodacom Eta. So I'm hoping to buy Vodacom water because it's cheaper for me to transfer there. And to buy Eta, it's cheaper for you to send money from one of the other participants. And that is human behavior. There's no standard in that. Your adoption question, us as humans will adopt to what is appropriate for the use case we want to action. It's never going to be common. So it just on the India thing, sorry, I know there's 8 minutes. If you look at the count of that in China, WeChat wasn't driven by the government, was President Lai.
And it, yeah, you just
So yeah, she pretty much lost the sorry, the chip there is, and maybe that is one of the best examples in the world. Largest mobile payments market in the world, China, and what happened there? The two largest players actually defined. And what's amazing in China is 93 to 97% of all payments today in China is done by a barcode or a QR. And it's done in real-time fashion, whether it's a card transaction, faster payments transaction, or odd transaction. It's certified, it's biometric that you don't even realize there was a fashion that purposes. It's a highly authenticated society, think that way. And so this education there happens seamless. But the fact that they got right is they used probably the most basic factor to unlock value because and restrict the value chain. I think that's the point. Standard is only as good as you understand how you implement the value chain and then opening up acceptance and accessibility in the right way. But all that rules out, that's the point. I just wanted to maybe let it for you. What else would you add?
I mean, who's enforcing the stat? I mean, as Sean said it earlier, there is a starter, the message rails exist, or pay shops there, or UPI is there. But who's putting the cattle, right? Because the problem is if you do it as a democratic process, it will not get enough. This is the way. Doesn't work. Right? Because you have differing interests. You have differing interests at play. So you need, I think, in some cases, you need a firm direction or some sort of enforcement or mandate to say, hey, no, we don't have a choice. You have to do this. That's what the country needs. And I think where it doesn't, why it works in Brazil, why it works in India is before there's the options to not do it. I think with ISO 2022, it's message format, right? It's a protocol. How you use it, someone can decide and say, hey, in South Africa, we're going to do this with this message. And there it will be working. But even in India, even in Brazil, there's no interoperability between card and VPI, right? So interoperability is incredibly hard to achieve irrespective of, you can achieve it in the same form factor, but it's very hard to achieve across form factors. And I think that, I don't know if anyone saw.
Well, then that may lead to a last point. If we look at South Africa, I'm a bigger systemization program is key tools we first. And the values they can bring to the table, if you summarize it in 2-3 sentences, each of you to do this, how to say achieve major gains in getting to this last mile of an ideal standard better than we has done today. Who?
I think there's analysis paralysis here. Like we're thinking too much. We're like, I think someone needs to take a decision and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Now let's get it do. We're still thinking. We're still planning. We're still saying, hey, we will do this. Let's find out what's the best way. I mean, look around in the world. It doesn't need to be Liège. It doesn't need to be Brazil. But this is not reinventing the wheel. South Africa is not inventing something brand new from scratch that's never been done before. Pick a path and let's execute. I think for the past 2 years, we've been part of various discussions. There's been a lot of action, a lot of moving forward. But you're asking me, what can we do better? I think we can take decisions fast and then get people to those faster. Because I'm still waiting for PayShap to get going. 6 paragraphs, which is summary was, as you?
You'll be? I think it's 2 parts to one. And I mean, going back to our old previous question around the acceptance of a shop, we actually don't have acceptance for people to utilize. But that said, I think from a people's usage perspective, it is going to be use case to think. And it needs to be easy. Remove the complications. I mean, you all got banking apps. And they all work differently. You've gotten used to it. Bring somebody new. And that's where the problem starts. This is way too difficult. I'm just going to go back to the old way of doing it. So yes, to me, that's where, and you can't have a standard for it at all. Because where the use case to pay for parking versus the use case to pay for a meal with a whole host of friends and everybody wants to split the bill is two totally different use cases. And the user experience is totally different. But what do we try and do? We try and throw all of those things together, overcomplicate it, and when somebody tries to do something, he kind of needs to copy 50 fields and he just wants to pay Xbox. Yeah.
And so if I summarize, you make a decision, make it as simple as possible, but don't make it a standard. And I want to add maybe something to it. It's maybe not a standard, but it's some rules they buy implementation. And we've seen in Brazil they've done, I think, extremely well. That you shoot 15 specific user experience IDOTs. Said, listen, whether you're a bank, a fintech, a retailer, a in your app, you offer payments in these countries, you will have your notifications for a PIPC payment always in the left bar. When you offer PIPCs, it will always be one of your three most prominent elements on the screen, etc., etc., etc. And another thinking in a patient team is also, but so you know what, like in China, if you want to offer a payment that or capability that accepts spatial, you always have a QR code in the right top street, like you see immediately. You go through that, thereafter, there's a familiar screen, and the rest is up to you because now consumers get that consistency, but it's not dictatorial. Now, from my perspective, that is refreshing. It's just can we get the decision and I'll assume and us to make every do it. Now, I just want to spend a couple of minutes on some of the questions, if I may. I think there's been some really, really interesting ones, and I'm going to shoot, and then we have a round robin on those. I think the first one is from, I'm going to put it Jans, Selfontein. How would you recommend extending ISO 20022 to support operability? I think that's for sure, to be honest.
Easy. We've got 2 documents already printed. So within the standard itself, it actually has a section for regulatory reporting. Real elements or attributes you currently have for regulatory reporting is actually in the payment as well. Whether you use the structured or unstructured information. So the short answer is already caters for it. If you want more information, just go to the VMPG site. There's practice document that we created on how to actually use the elements for regulatory.
Right. Thanks. That was very well said. Then Vaneshri Governor's awesome Rahul. The biggest challenge that you have faced thus far, you best reporting interoperability.
I think it's that fragmentation, because when we are trying to solve for, how do I get a e-commerce website to accept not just card, but then Pesha, different wallets, different buy now, pay later. I mean, we already have a checkout page of and to integrate all of this, it's time, effort, money, right? So I think the challenge, the hardest part has been delivering everything fast enough.
So, and then another question quickly, just at the heavy, the thing on Pixel is, can and how would digital identity solve interoperability?
To what is my question? I know.
Let's say 2 payments.
2 payments. Okay. So your face is your face, right? Accessing your app. Understanding that you are paying the right person. And we have this thing called proxy resolution, right? Is a way to that. I think digital identity is to make sure that when you've onboarded the right person to the right account. So that you do not have impersonation. I mean, at the end of the day, you cannot have your face impersonated. You can have paper impersonation. I can impersonate you to try and impersonate you through AI, your voice. But your face, I'm afraid, is what it is.
And then you lead a digital, did you buy the physical so by recurring newspaper? I think like security, onboarding, I mean, what I've experienced is digital KYC, we sharing of KYC information that to me, stuff like that is important to access any SaaS service. Otherwise, again, we're limiting access.
And then I'm just going to treasure for this because I thought it was an interesting one. Can the defining standards be manipulated by participants to the undefined dish?
You? Your answer is no.
No. I don't know enough. I think this. Let me define why. Like, it's about how you read the asset when your duty status, if it is not governed, and now you populate it. As an example, you even see it in the car space. That, yes, you do your level 3 testing and certification, but at the end of the day, if you do not implement your rule behind it and those batch control and you know this, yes, the service books, but you're still not using all those right. So I think it can be manipulated that in. But in terms of technical, I think for sure. Maybe we haven't tried manipulating it. Are we manipulating the standard? You're circumventing this. It's a difference. Okay, but just.
Thank you very much. And to my team, please, thank you very much. Thank you.